Breaking news in the case of Adnan Syed, the subject of the hit podcast Serial. We're live outside the courthouse. As dramatic poll results emerge in the race for governor, trailing candidate Republican Dan Cox has a message about his Democratic challenger Wes Moore. A high-speed chase stretching from the city to the county ends in the arrest of 3 teens. Why it's reigniting concerns over city crime spreading to neighboring counties.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 4.
We are following 3 major stories tonight. First, happening right now, a hearing in the Adnan Syed case, the latest on his possible freedom after spending more than 20 years in jail for murder.
We have new insight in the race for governor of Maryland, speaking with 2 experts about the recent poll that shows one candidate is firmly in the lead.
And in a city in crisis, a car chase last week reigniting concerns. City crime is bleeding into nearby counties. What's being done to stop the spread?
We begin with breaking news right now. You're looking live outside of Circuit Court in downtown Baltimore, where a hearing is going on that could end with Adnan Syed, the man at the center of the popular podcast Serial, walking out of court a free man today.
That's right. Syed, who is sitting in the courtroom right now, was convicted of killing his high school girlfriend, Hae Min Lee, more than 20 years ago. Now, today, that could all change, and it comes at the request of prosecutors. City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, she's in court as well, has filed a motion to vacate Syed's conviction, asking for a new trial and saying new evidence needs to be considered, specifically 2 other potential suspects who have not been publicly named. Our Jeff Abel is in the courtroom right now. He'll bring us a live report as soon as court lets out. Once a decision has been made, we're also expecting to hear from Marilyn Mosby and from the victim's family in this case. We'll bring you that live.
With eyes on November, the Republican looking to become Maryland's next governor is taking swipes at his Democratic opponent, Wes Moore. GOP hopeful Dan Cox is standing with the family of the other Wes Moore, which is also the title of the candidate's first New York Times best-selling book. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost was first to report among the concerns about the book months ago. She joins us now with this push from Cox. Mackenzie?
Yeah, Kai, so the concerns all center around the book, The Other Wes Moore, right? And really the candidate today centering in his criticisms about the words printed on the back of it, where the candidate talked about 2 boys from Baltimore. Now, that copy was later changed, the publisher says, at the request of the author. And I've been pressing the candidate Wes Moore about these problems for months. Now, Dan Cox holding this news conference here outside of City Schools headquarters because the book is part of the curriculum and required reading for some high school students across the city. And Dan Cox says he wants that book pulled. The Other Wes Moore, the book title of gubernatorial hopeful Wes Moore's first book, and at the center of controversy.
It's inappropriate to be presenting material that is really fictional campaign material as part of a curriculum.
Delegate Dan Cox, Republican gubernatorial hopeful, says the inconsistencies with his opponent's book, highlighted by months of Fox 45 News' investigations, are reason why Moore should not win the election. Cox focusing on the back cover, which was later changed at the request of Moore, around the same time he started talking about running for governor.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Standing by Cox, the family of the other Wes Moore, who's currently in prison. In April, the same family spoke exclusively with Fox 45 News about the concerns with the candidate and author Moore using their story in his book.
It's a bunch of trash. It's a fabrication. You know, he embellished a tragedy to use to make his triumph, if you would, right?
Cox also highlighting the fact that the book is required reading in high schools across Baltimore. Fox 45 News previously reporting that in 2018, the book was required reading for 9th graders. And in 2020, the city bought just over 4,600 copies of The Other Wes Moore. From 2010 to 2019, the city spending more than $15,000 on copies of the book and field trips to see Moore speak in person. When pressed on the issues, Moore says he stands by his stories.
I don't think I'd let the narrative continue.
Despite the investigations bringing these inconsistencies to light, Moore going on to win the crowded Democratic primary. When asked why he thinks voters will care now,
it was a divided primary on the Democratic side. When you see the larger view of Maryland and they hear these issues and they hear the concerns that you've raised and that others have raised, it's going to resonate.
Moore maintains the stories about how 2 people could have very different outcomes in their lives. Now, I did just get a statement from the Moore campaign calling Dan Cox's event today an attempt to distract from the campaign itself. The statement goes on to say that Wes Moore is staying focused on the issues important to him, like growing the economy, making sure everyone gets a quality education. And I did ask city schools for a statement, given the fact that Dan Cox says he wants this book pulled, but I've yet to get a response. Kai?
And Mackenzie, speaking of the race, a new Goucher College poll came out today showing Wes Moore has nearly a 20-point lead over Dan Cox. Did the delegate say anything about that?
Yeah, he was asked about that today. He says that he's simply not worried about the poll numbers. Dan Cox says the numbers today show him within striking distance of his Democratic opponent, Wes Moore. However, if you take a closer look at the polling numbers, you'll see that the polls talk to some of these likely voters, and they have an unfavorable view of Dan Cox, more than 50% unfavorable. But when you look at Wes Moore, his favorables are more than 50%. Earlier today, I also spoke with political analyst John Deedy, and he says that Dan Cox's alignment with the former president Donald Trump and his pro-Trump-like comments and rhetoric will not fare well among general election voters here in a state like Maryland.
In the primary, he ran a more polarizing pro-Trump race. And the fact that Maryland is a much more liberal state or Democratic state, and that he's not really reached out to that type of group. I think a lot of people, they're not even hedging their bets, giving a little of both. They're just basically putting the chips on the table for Wes Moore because they realize that that is the better bet to make. And Cox's fundraising, is abysmal right now.
Now, in his statement earlier this afternoon, Wes Moore campaign tells me that even though these numbers indicate that his campaign has momentum, they say they're not taking anything for granted. Live in Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Baltimore police detailing another violent weekend in the city. Since Friday, there were 6 shootings. 1 person was killed, 6 others injured. In that same time frame, there were 27 aggravated assaults and 70 arrests related to illegal firearms. Now, the violence in the city continues a disturbing trend. Shootings and deaths are up over last year. This year, 250 people have been killed. 535 have survived being shot in the city. That's compared to 243 people being killed at this time last year and 507 non-fatal shootings.
Baltimore police identified 2 people who were killed in the city. 37-year-old Delaney McLeod was shot in the head in East Baltimore last week. He died from those injuries. 34-year-old Brian Johnson was shot and killed in September. Police are investigating both cases.
And the high-speed chase that spanned 3 interstates and 2 jurisdictions this past Friday is reigniting concern about Baltimore City crime bleeding over county lines. Alexa Ashwell live outside police headquarters with questions about that pursuit. Alexa?
Mary, including whether the department followed all proper procedures and policies related to the pursuit. Police say the vehicle was wanted in connection to an armed robbery that chased bleeding into Baltimore County.
Baltimore City Police now saying this vehicle 3 juveniles used to lead officers on a more than 15-mile high-speed pursuit into Baltimore County this past Friday was wanted in connection to an armed robbery. The pursuit ending with the suspects in custody and the recovery, police say, of 3 loaded handguns.
The fact that this is blood up here is a little more than I care to think about.
Residents are raising concern about city crime bleeding into the county. Former Baltimore Police Deputy Commissioner Jason Johnson believes it comes down to an increase in violence and a lack in accountability.
There's just not a lot of accountability for people who commit acts of violence or any other crime in Baltimore, and particularly for young people.
Johnson says the violent crime of an armed robbery does fit the criteria that likely allowed officers to pursue the vehicle in the first place.
BPD has a very specific policy on pursuits and the criteria that have to exist in order for there to be a pursuit.
As for the actual pursuit, Fox 45 News questioning whether all policies and procedures were followed, asking, is this pursuit currently under review? What criteria does the department follow when determining whether to engage in and continue a pursuit? And at any point, did the department determine the pursuit had become too dangerous to the public? Live footage captured the suspects weaving in and out of traffic at high speeds, at one point striking an innocent driver's van. A county police officer assisting in the pursuit was also hurt.
Police supervisors are required to, essentially assert themselves in a supervisory way to determine, A, does the pursuit meet the criteria for an authorized pursuit? In this case, it looks like it did. And then B, to assert that supervisory oversight to make sure the pursuit is being conducted in a way that's safe to the public and to the individual police officers.
Now, just minutes ago, I received a response from the Baltimore Police Department, a spokesperson telling me the vehicle was reported stolen out of York County, Pennsylvania. As for the pursuit policy, the spokesperson gave me a copy of it. It is 12 pages. I'll be reviewing that, and I'll have an update for you coming up at 5. For now, reporting live outside police headquarters, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Alexa, thank you. And we want to know what you think. Do you fear crime in Baltimore City is going beyond its borders? We just opened the poll at 4, but so far 100% of respondents say yes. Go to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in.
Let us give thanks for Queen Elizabeth's commitment to the Commonwealth throughout her reign.
Services are held for Queen Elizabeth today. This is a live look at Westminster Abbey, where mourners for the Queen gathered today. The Queen made her final journey to Windsor Castle this morning and was laid to rest alongside her husband, Prince Philip. Members of the royal family walked behind her coffin during the procession. Along the road to Windsor Castle, tens of thousands lined the streets, hoping to see the Queen for a final time and thank her for her service to Britain.
Well, I think she's a symbol, really, a symbol of the strength and power of the country and the unity that she brings together with that family spirit. She's always been there, so she's not political. She cares about everyone. There's no agenda, and has always set an example of values which are really important for us.
Sad for a lady that's given her life to serve our country. It didn't really feel real till I walked through there, and now it feels very real that she's actually gone. But I felt I needed to come and say goodbye from myself and from my family and say thank you.
The Queen's funeral also drew world leaders to London. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden were in attendance. Queen Elizabeth met 13 different presidents during her 70-year reign. Well, now that the Queen has been laid to rest, the country will turn toward her son Charles's coronation. While he officially became king immediately after the Queen died, the ceremony is unlikely to be held for some time. When Queen Elizabeth's father died, the country waited more than a year before holding her coronation. Putting porch pirates on notice, the new plan from residents to fight back and keep their packages secure. Purple Pride feeling a bit bruised today. We hear from Coach John Harbaugh following the Ravens' loss yesterday.
We've been tracking a couple of showers and sprinkles on the radar as we head into the afternoon and evening commute. Temperatures going to be falling from the very warm 80s, eventually back into the 70s. I'm going to let you know if you're going to have to pull out your umbrella. We'll have a check on the radar coming up in my Weather Authority forecast.
We are following breaking news. 22 years in prison just took a few hours in court today, and the judge, Melissa Finn, has vacated Adnan Syed's conviction today.
Yeah, Adnan Syed was convicted of killing 18-year-old Hae-Min Lee. Her body was found in Leakin Park. They were students together, boyfriend and girlfriend, at Woodlawn High School in Baltimore County, but the judge has vacated this. This does not mean Syed is in the clear at this point. One of the reasons why this came up is because the city state's attorney's office, led by Marilyn Mosby, did not feel confident in the evidence they had in his conviction in the first place. Syed has tried multiple times to get his conviction overturned. That hasn't happened. We do see people coming out of the court now, including Fox 45's Jeff Abel. So hopefully we will have someone come up to the podium in a moment. We believe that will be City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby.
And earlier today, they took a brief recess in order to give Hae-Min Lee's brother a chance to make a statement via Zoom in court today. He lives in California. The family very upset, including their attorney, that they really only were given a day or two notice that this hearing was even taking place. And Kai, you know, we followed this case since the start. It does seem like this happened so fast.
It does seem fast.
For a case that really captured the nation's attention with this serial podcast.
Right.
That happened in 2014. It really reopened so many details of this case, for not just for us here in Baltimore, but for the entire nation.
And you mentioned, Mary, the Hae-Min Lee's family is steadfast in their belief that Adnan Syed killed her. There was evidence presented in the original trial about cell phone connecting him to that area at that time, although there have been experts who said that information, that evidence is not necessarily reliable. There are others who believe there are other people who had a reason to want to kill Hae-Min Lee. Some of that, obviously, we probably will find out if there is indeed a new trial.
That's right. Adnan Syed is incarcerated at the Patuxent Institution. That is a state prison in Jessup. Again, if Finn, now that we know she overturned his conviction, she still has to consider an adjoining request from prosecutors to have him released from custody. So there are some steps here. Now, sometimes these can happen very quickly. So again, we are just waiting for both sides to come out of court after this really momentous decision today, and we will go to that live.
Yeah, and one of the things we want to point out here, Mary, is that, again, this doesn't necessarily put Adnan Syed in the clear. The state's attorney's office has said they don't necessarily have faith in the evidence that convicted Adnan Syed, but that doesn't mean they believe he's innocent. Those are two separate things. And so what remains to be seen is whether he will, in fact, be charged again with the crime, and whether or not the state's attorney's office has evidence I'd imagine that they would present to a grand jury that a grand jury would believe would then take him to another trial. That remains to be seen at this point. We should also point out Melissa Finn, if you remember her. Okay, we're going to go to weather right now with meteorologist Jonathan Myers.
All right, well, taking a look here at the HD radar. Got a fairly quiet picture here, although as you head up toward Philadelphia and actually even here northeast of Baltimore, southwest of Baltimore, those have kind of bled south and westbound. It's been a couple of sprinkles and very light showers as our latest weather maker, a very weak cold front tries to push in. You may have noticed the extra clouds this afternoon. Well, that's what they're from. And behind it, it turns less humid. Not much cooler, not yet, but things are going to be cooling significantly as we head towards the end of this week. A real taste of fall just in time for the official beginning of fall on Thursday. 84 degrees right now. Some of that haze still on the Toyota East Unit Harbor Skycam, that is. Taking a look there at M&T Bank Stadium. Winds out of the warm west-southwest at about 5 miles an hour. Dew points, they've been teetering right around 60 degrees, so a little touch of mugginess, if you will. Temperature at 84 here in Baltimore. Should be at about 79 or so for an average high this time of year, so we've been above average again today. 82 degrees at Cockeysville, 80 at Bel Air, and 81 at Annapolis, 81 over Laurel Way. And the big heat down to our south and west. Look at you at St. Louis, at Memphis, and Dallas. Summertime is not over yet here, and some of this warmth continues to come our way. We'll be on the edge of it, though, over the next couple of days again before a big change midweek and end of this week. Now, we've also got down in the tropics, Hurricane Fiona, Category 1 hurricane moving northbound and eventually making a curve after really causing huge issues, devastating portions of Puerto Rico, full power grid outage, lots of devastating flooding. Now it's moving near the eastern Bahamas, eventually maybe as a Category 3 major hurricane. Winds at 125 miles an hour could pass nearly right over Bermuda and eventually heading up towards the Canadian Maritimes. The good news for us is if you take a look here at all the computer model trends, they're all kind of clustered. This means pretty good agreement right along that area, unfortunately for those folks in Bermuda, right near Bermuda, and then eventually into the Maritimes of Canada. Nothing really much heading toward us here in the United States, although there could be some swells that eventually make their way towards the mid-Atlantic coastline later on this week. Now, also out in the tropics, 2 low chances of development, but they're a long way from becoming anything right now. So over about the next 3 to 5 days, we'll be watching those. Around here, though, I think during the afternoon and evening hours, all the clouds and the stray spotty showers move away. They dry out, and actually overnight looking pretty good. The humidity comes down, skies clear out, and temperatures settle down likely into the 60s most spots. Still going to be mild for this time of year overall. But again, it looks like for tomorrow, another warm day, but less humid. High 86, 87 on Wednesday. So the warmth is not done yet. Now, Wednesday night into Thursday morning, that next cold front comes in and fall begins 9:04 p.m. Thursday evening. Some showers, some thunderstorms perhaps late Wednesday night into Thursday morning with that high near 80 degrees. And then look, the bottom falls out just in time for the first full day of fall on Friday. Feels a lot more like fall with highs in the upper 60s and low to mid 70s with some mostly sunny skies. And look at that into the weekend, a real winner here. Saturday, 74 degrees and just a couple of stray clouds. On Sunday, we warm it up back to about 81. There could be a stray shower. Showers and storms return for Monday.
All right, thank you. We're going to go back to our breaking news. The murder conviction of Adnan Syed has been overturned. It happened just minutes ago.
Let's go to Jeff Abel, who's live outside of the court. Jeff, what can you tell us?
The courtroom erupted in applause just moments ago when a judge concluded that prosecutors had an abundance of evidence and that the murder conviction of Adnan Syed should be vacated. Now, right now, there's a crowd of media and friends and family members out here in front of the courthouse where we are awaiting the appearance of State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, whose office has been investigating this case for the past year. They are expected here at any moment to comment about their findings. The judge also ordered the shackles be removed from the defendant, Syed, who has been in prison now for more than 20 years. And he will and is expected to be walking out of this courthouse in just a few moments with State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby. Now, they've been investigating this case for more than a year now, and they did conclude that about back in May they did find an abundance of evidence, at least 2 witnesses, which they say were not disclosed to the defense in this case, which led suspicion about the case. They also questioned phone technology, which was used to convict Syed at the moment, and they also said DNA test, touch DNA, the new testing procedure that they now have, which is far more exact, revealed no conclusive link to the defendant, Adnan Syed. Now, all of that led the judge to conclude that this conviction should be vacated and the defendant is to be released. The victim's family, however, in this case is not too happy. They testified after a delay in court this afternoon that ordering the judge or advising the judge to do the right thing. The brother of the Hae-Min Lee, who was strangled to death in this case, said he had thought that the state was on his side, but now he feels betrayed.
And Jeff, if you can hear me, can I ask?
The judge issued this ruling. Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff, were you able to see Adnan Syed's reaction in the courtroom today when his conviction was overturned?
Right. He throughout the entire proceeding, even during some of the testimony, he just looked down at the table, and it appeared that he was shedding a tear, and it started to break up toward the end of the hearing when she was delivering her verdict and her decision. But he was obviously anxiety-ridden, and he's been in jail now for more than 20 years. But his family is here, and so are a lot of other defendants who have been released from jail after 20, 30 years. They, too, came to support him. One of them I talked to in the hallway a few minutes ago said there is no question when he first met him behind the prison walls that he did nothing to commit murder, and they've been fighting for his freedom ever since.
Did you hear the comments from young Lee, Hae-Min Lee's brother, when he testified virtually? Did you hear his comments, and what did he say?
I did hear the brother testify. He said that he felt betrayed. He said, "I always thought the state was on my side, but out of nowhere, this was a motion to vacate. I feel betrayed," is his exact words. He said, "When I think it's over, it's over. It's always something that comes back. It's killing me and my mother," he told the judge. "I believe in the court, however, and I believe the judge will make the right decision."
And it's interesting, Jeff. I was just going to say that we should point out that this is the judge vacating his conviction. This does not mean, and we're not accusing here, but this does not mean Mr. Syed is innocent of this crime. It means that the judge, Melissa Finn, is vacating this conviction.
That is correct. In fact, she gave the state 30 days to come up with a decision, either whether they are going to retry this case or throw it out altogether. They have 30 days to do so. In the meantime, Syed is expected to be walking out of the courthouse anytime today.
And Jeff, if we can ask, this was supposed to be somewhat of a dramatic day for Marilyn Mosby. This would have been the start of her federal trial, but here we have an entirely different situation where she will be in front of cameras today talking about a different case. Can you talk to us a little bit about the significance of that?
Right. There was a lot of concern that, they filed this motion on the very, very eve of the day that she was supposed to have jury selection in her own federal perjury case. And there was a lot of suspicion in a lot of people's minds that this was somehow going to benefit her and had more to do with her than the case itself. But she was here today. She was sitting on the front row and says her office continues to be on the side of victims and will prosecute where they see something that needs to be prosecuted. In this case, however, it was her office that brought forward this information, and it was her office that asked that Adnan Syed be let go and vacate this conviction.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. Jeff, we're going to get you to stand by there for a second. We've got Kurt Nachman on the phone right now. Kurt, are you there?
No.
Yeah. Kurt, you followed this case. What are your thoughts about this? This is a blockbuster moment in Baltimore legal history, a very well-known case that Mary and I have covered for years as journalists together. What are your thoughts about Judge Finn vacating the conviction of Adnan Syed?
Well, I certainly think that if there was exculpatory evidence that was withheld in this case, it certainly would be grounds for the overturning of the underlying conviction. It sounds as though there was exculpatory evidence that it either was inadvertently withheld or, for some other reason it was withheld from the defense team. And obviously information about another suspect, even if the other suspect was ultimately ruled out as a potential suspect, is something that the defense team should have been made aware of at the time of his original trial.
And Kurt, I know this is an unusual proceeding right now, but in cases similar to this that you've been part of, what's happening in the courthouse right now?
Well, right now, obviously, they're preparing for a press conference for Ms. Mosby to speak to the press, but they're going to have to go back and evaluate the evidence of the case. They're going to have to determine whether or not they want to retry Adnan Syed for the underlying crime. I think one of the issues when you try old cases is, frankly, the evidence is just gone. For example, the Baltimore City Police Department had a flood probably 15, 20 years ago, destroyed a large amount of old evidence. in some of these older cases. So it makes it very difficult, not only for people who are working for exonerations to find their evidence, but to retry old cases.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Baltimore police are reinvestigating this case. We know they're down 500 officers, detectives, of course, in that as well, homicide detectives. Do they have enough resources to do this adequately?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Under no circumstances do they have the resources to properly investigate this case. You know, they're inundated, they're swamped, they've got 300 plus murders every year. You know, the state's attorney's office is busy investigating 20, 30, 40-year-old cases rather than prosecuting the cases that are currently ongoing in the city of Baltimore.
Kurt, this is an unusual case also in that this isn't DNA evidence that's come back. We have seen major national DNA stories out of Baltimore. Bernard Webster set free based on DNA evidence, probably one of the biggest. Kurt Bloodsworth released after DNA evidence says that he did not commit this particular crime that he was accused of committing. This is one in which they're saying the evidence that convicted Mr. Syed isn't reliable. This is the state's attorney bringing that forth, the judge, Melissa Finn, agreeing with that. How in the world, following on what Mary was saying, to her point, are they going to retry this man if, again, they're down officers, the information obviously is old, witnesses die, things of that nature? How in the world would that even proceed forward?
It's going to be extremely difficult. The homicide detective, they have several homicide detectives assigned to cold cases, would get this case. They do have specialized training in cold cases and investigating old cases that have gone dormant. They'll go back. They'll sort of shake the tree for the various suspects, which were not named in the state's attorney's office motion, and they'll interview them. They'll see whether or not they're potential suspects, real suspects, or whether or not they can effectively be excluded as a suspect in this case. Again, there's a lot of information that we don't know as members of the public that clearly the state's attorney's office chose to withhold from its filing, and mostly that has to do with who those potential suspects were.
And again, for people just tuning in, it's just after 4:30. A major news story today. The murder conviction of Adnan Syed was overturned today by Judge Melissa Finn. Kurt Nachman is here because we are waiting to see if Adnan is going to be released and walk down those courthouse steps. And Marilyn Mosby also, we are waiting for word from her. Can I ask you, Kurt, though, I'm reading prosecutors have 30 days to determine whether they want to drop the murder charge against Syed or try him again for the murder of his ex-girlfriend's death. Is that something that they are talking about right now, perhaps, that they need, that they want to announce? Or are they going to take time to make that decision?
I don't think you're going to hear an announcement from the state's attorney's office today necessarily, but certainly if they didn't think about that prior to these filings in terms of the viability of their case, the state's attorney's office has the absolute discretion and ability to reopen the conviction. But once that conviction is reopened, they can enter a null pros or a nolle proseque. It means to not prosecute in Latin, and they can decline to prosecute the case if they so elect to. So if the state's attorney's office has reviewed this, you would hope that they have properly reviewed it to see whether or not it is a viable case at this juncture. They would do that by tracking down witnesses, talking to witnesses, seeing what detectives are alive that handled this underlying case. You know, a lot of those guys, I mean, they've been retired for 30 years.
Right. Kurt, we're going to ask you to stand by for just a moment. We're going to go live to our Rebecca Pryor, who is live outside of the courthouse, I believe. Rebecca, are you there? All right, Kurt.
I'm outside of the courthouse. I'm sorry.
Oh, you are. Can you hear us, Rebecca?
I can hear you. I'm not outside of the courthouse. I believe we're going to Jeff for that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, we'll get back to Rebecca.
We'll get back.
She is following some crime in the city, so we'll do that. But we're going to stay right now. We know Adnan Syed could be released by the city state's attorney's office. As they say, there is some new evidence in this case, including 2 potential witnesses. Experts have raised questions about the timing of the announcement, considering Marilyn Mosby herself also facing trial. Today would have been the start of her federal trial, but last week it was postponed.
Right. Defense Attorney Kurt Nachman, we just spoke with him, pointed out something very good. We're talking about close to 30 years here, not quite, but it's been a long time. There are detectives who retire, people who, including police officers who pass away, sadly. And so the hurdle of trying to reestablish evidence in a case would be very difficult. Kurt, are you still there?
I am still here.
Yeah,
how are you?
This is a question I want to ask, and this is certainly not accusatory. What happened here with Baltimore City Police? Was this just not, and I want to point out, with all due respect to Serial and the podcast, a Serial podcast is not police work. It's an examination of something that was already done, and it's not done in real time. So we want to point that out. And I'm not taking away the credibility of it, but those are two separate things. But what happened here with Baltimore City Police? Was this a breakdown in just good police work?
I'm not really sure about that. I listened to the Serial podcast when it first came out. I thought it was a very entertaining piece of sort of documentary journalism. I think that the original underlying case was interesting in the sense that it was one of the first cases in the entire country that used GPS and cell phone data to sort of triangulate and locate a potential suspect. Obviously, I don't have enough information to answer about these other potential suspects. Again, that's something that does happen. You develop other suspects, other leads, and for one reason or another, a detective usually discounts them. But that information does, under Supreme Court case law, have to be turned over to the defense. One thing I wanted to address, the question was whether or not Adnan Syed would be released from the Baltimore City courthouse. He's more likely than not going to be transported back to Patuxent, and then he will be released. It's my understanding he's going to be placed on GPS monitoring until the state's attorney's office makes a decision. So he won't actually get released from the side door of the courthouse. Once he does get released, he typically will have 24 hours to report to get an ankle monitor placed on him, either at a private home monitoring company or with a government-run home monitoring company. So I know that was a question that some folks asked, and he's more likely than not going to be transported back to the facility for processing and release.
Okay, that's what I was asking. That makes more sense rather than walking out the courtroom steps. Again, anything can happen. Kurt, please stand by, and thank you so much for your expertise in this. We do appreciate it. Stand by. We're going to go back to our reporter, Jeff Abel, outside Circuit Court with talking to some of the folks out there. Jeff?
Yeah, we've been talking to several folks out here. We're talking right now to Willie Hamilton, a man who was released from prison just back in June after serving 30 years in prison for a homicide he says he does not commit, and was released on his own. He knows what this moment is like. Can you describe for us what was going through your mind?
I didn't say it was a homicide.
Not homicide, but...
Not that I didn't commit. I didn't say that.
Okay, but you were
released on juvenile restoration.
Right. What was on your mind at this point when you had the hearing and it was still up in the air?
With him?
With you.
With me? Well, during that time, I knew it was a great possibility that the judge would deny it, because at this time, during this Juvenile Restorative Act, there was no hearings being conducted for any juveniles in PG County, and the judge didn't want to do it. But through the advocacy group that I work for, Life After Release, they convinced the judge, the state's attorney, to proceed forward with this hearing. And when the judge suspended my sentence, it was so overwhelming. It was still hard. It's still hard to believe today, after 90 days being free. It's still hard to believe.
What are you thinking? You know Mr. Syed. What are you thinking about the outcome and how this all developed?
I believe that this has been long overdue. The state's attorney and them had evidence that proved that there were other suspects in the crime, and they should have covered all avenues before they railroaded this man like this.
You've talked to him. What has he told you?
This is a testament of how this individual, Adnan Syed, is. He was just concerned about his parents. He just wanted to be there for his parents. It wasn't about him, it was about his parents.
Do you think he expected this outcome today?
No, because we know how the system postpones things. People can change their mind. Political atmosphere, they change opinions and views of certain things, so we didn't expect. We were hoping for the best, and this is the best outcome.
What are you thinking yourself?
I'm just so ecstatic and happy for his parents and his family, and for him. I can't wait to hug him, cry with him.
Did you never doubt his...
Never doubt it. Never doubt it. Never doubt it. And in prison, you hear so many people say that they're innocent of something, but this man is truly innocent of his crime.
What made you think that? What was it about his demeanor or behavior that was so?
We talked. We had conversations. The way that this charge was portrayed during that time was like he was an Pakistani Muslim who was afraid that his parents may find out that he was in a relationship with someone who was not Muslim, and that was totally not what the case was about, you know. And I'm just glad that he's free.
You suspect a lot of other people are in prison with the same.
Man, it is tons of them, and again with this organization, Life After Release, that I'm involved with, we're trying to get a lot of innocent people home, a lot of innocent people. And overcharged, over-sentenced. And it's not just about innocence. People are being overcharged and over-sentenced for crimes they may have committed.
Here's Ms. Mosby about to speak.
We love you.
Thank you.
We love you.
Appreciate you.
This is Marilyn Mosby, City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, about to give a statement on the Adnan Syed conviction. Vacated. Let's stand by as Ms. Mosby prepares to speak.
Good afternoon. God is good. Since the inception of my administration, I've made it clear that the sole mission of my office is to safeguard communities in Baltimore through the effective prosecution of crime. And in order to fulfill this mission, our prosecutors have been sworn to not only aggressively advocate on behalf of victims of crime, but when the evidence exists, to exonerate those that have been falsely accused and convicted. The public must know that the justice we can wait. Hey, we'll wait.
And we are watching and witnessing Adnan Syed just walked out of the courtroom. As we listen to Marilyn Mosby, she has paused for just a second. He is walking right down the sidewalk into the street, and he will be transferred, it looks like, back to the Patuxent Institute, which is what Kurt Nachman said. He has GPS monitoring. His shackles are not on any longer. After his conviction was vacated today, you see him there in the van, likely headed to Patuxent Institute to be processed.
Yeah, Mary, this is not just a Baltimore story, a Maryland or national story. This story is international. As you and I prepare to come out here, I scanned the web tonight. There are online papers in England that are aware of the proceedings before this happened. They were just talking about the fact of it coming up. And so this story is being viewed around the globe. I think we're going to go back to Marilyn Mosby in just a moment. As Kurt Nachman did point out to us, there will probably be a window of time where Mr. Syed is required to go get a GPS monitoring device, either from the state itself, some government entity, or from some private company. He will have a degree of freedom, but will not be completely free, while the state's attorney's office decides whether or not to retry Mr. Syed for the murder of Hae Min Lee.
That's right. They have 30 days to determine whether they want to drop the murder charge against Syed or to try him again for the murder of his ex-girlfriend. She was only 18 at the time of the murder back in 1999.
She would be 42 years old on October 15th of this year.
And he is 41 years old right now. So much time has gone by.
Yeah.
Again, the reason the world, the nation, and all of really Baltimore has paid attention to this case more so than others is because the popularity really of this serial podcast.
That is absolutely true. It is because people outside of Baltimore weren't really familiar with this case. You and I were from covering it. But here's Marilyn Mosby again.
And Marilyn Mosby is waiting for family members. That is Adnan Syed's mother and other relatives. She wants them surrounded by her as she continues her press conference about this. momentous day in Baltimore City legal history, really. And again, today would have been the start of Marilyn Mosby's federal trial. It was postponed last week. Just these two things happening.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is, and the dichotomy of the existences is really palpable here. Syed's family obviously elated, even at this proceeding. Hae-Min Lee's family is devastated at this point. They've been speaking, of course, through her brother, young Lee. But let's listen to Marilyn Mosby.
So we'll start again, guys, all right? Good afternoon, everyone. God is good. Since the inception of my administration, I've made it clear that the sole mission of my office is to safeguard communities in Baltimore through the effective prosecution of crime. And in order to fulfill this mission, our prosecutors have been sworn to not only aggressively advocate on behalf of victims of crime, but when the evidence exists, to exonerate those that have been falsely accused or convicted. The public has to know that justice is the only barometer of success for my office. And justice over convictions is not only our mantra, but our mission. And since the start of the administration, my office has paid this mission forward, which is why we created the first conviction integrity unit in the entire state of Maryland, a unit dedicated to reinvestigating claims of actual innocence, a unit that is now a national model replicated throughout the country and the state, and has already successfully exonerated 12 innocent men who cumulatively served 300 years in prison for crimes they did not commit. Justice over convictions is ultimately the reason why my office created in December of 2020 a sentencing review unit where my prosecutors review and modify the excessive sentences of juvenile lifers in the elderly prison population to ensure racial equity in a state that disproportionately incarcerates more black and brown people than any other state in the nation. This unit, which is only the second in the state of Maryland to exist, is headed by former Deputy Public Defender of Maryland, Becky Feldman. We've already modified and recommended the release of over 40 individuals, none of whom have reoffended since the inception of the unit. My sentencing review unit is responsible for the year-long collaborative investigation into this case and today's motion to vacate the conviction of Adnan Syed. The vacature statute, which was drafted, lobbied, testified to in Annapolis by my office, despite the opposition of almost every one of my colleagues across the state, with the exception of Aisha Braveboy, this vacature statute is responsible for today's outcome. As we are all aware, Adnan Syed stood trial twice for the homicide of 17-year-old Hae-Min Lee. A jury in 2000 found him guilty of premeditated murder, kidnapping, robbery, and false imprisonment, and the judge sentenced him to life plus 30 years in prison. Syed ultimately appealed that decision again and again. For the past 7 years, my office provided permission for the original and appellate jurisdiction over the case to the Attorney General's office under the direction of Brian Frosh, where, as all you guys are all aware, both trial judges and appellate courts denied Syed's post-conviction motions. In 2018, Maryland's Court of Special Appeals determined Syed was entitled to a new trial, only for the state's top court to overrule that opinion the following year. And then finally, appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court, the review was declined in 2019. The way that it happened this time, in 2021, Syed's attorneys, Erica Suter, who you will hear from momentarily, from the Office of the Public Defender, appealed to my office and brought the case to the attention of Becky Feldman in my sentencing review unit after the Juvenile Restoration Act passed in April of 2021. This act allows people convicted of crimes as juveniles to request a modification of sentence after they have served more than 20 years incarceration. Mr. Syed qualified because he spent more than 22 years. Becky Feldman subsequently led nearly a year-long exhaustive investigation reviewing the substantive facts of this case, where several problematic issues were presented, and thereafter leading my office to file a motion to vacate the conviction of Adnan Syed. Vacature, as we all have learned today, is a legal mechanism that once again was drafted, lobbied, testified to, and was integral in ensuring that my office was integral in ensuring that it passed, which provides prosecutors with a legal mechanism for the removal of a conviction based off of newly discovered evidence that calls into question the integrity of a conviction based on the interests of fairness and justice. Through our review, our reinvestigation revealed that the original prosecutors and the subsequent prosecutors in the Attorney General's office failed to disclose relevant information about alternative suspects, one of whom threatened to kill the victim and had motive to kill the victim, and both of whom had a pattern of violence against women. Our investigation suggests that the two suspects may have been involved individually or may have been involved together in the death of that beautiful young woman. Once again, through our review, our investigation uncovered that one of the suspects threatened Ms. Lee, saying he would make her disappear. He would kill her. We also received information that provided motive for that same alternative suspects. That information was never disclosed to the defendant and is the basis of the Brady violation that the judge has deemed. We also determined in our investigation that one of the alternative suspects was violent towards a woman and forcibly confined her before Adnan Syed's trial. The other suspect has had a history of sexual assault. None of that information was provided to defense counsel by either the original prosecutor or the Attorney General's office, where the original case file still sits. It was through our investigation we also learned that during the original investigation, one of the suspects were improperly cleared by investigators based on faulty polygraph tests and a faulty cell site evidence that was used against Adnan Syed that simply wouldn't stand up in court today. And finally, we found that the previous misconduct of one of the homicide detectives in the Syed's case, a detective that was negatively implicated in my office's first exoneree, Malcolm Bryan, contributed to a wrongful conviction in a separate 1999 murder case. For all of those reasons, my office petitioned the court jointly with Erica Suter from the Office of the Public Defender and asked that Adnan Syed be given a new trial where he is adequately represented and the latest evidence presented in the interests of fairness and justice, which is and has always been the hallmark of my administration as State Attorney for Baltimore City. At this stage, the trial has been set in for a new trial date because we're not yet declaring Adnan Syed is innocent, but we are declaring that in the interests of fairness and justice, he is entitled to a new trial. And because this is an ongoing case, there are limits to what I can say in this matter, but it is imperative that we start the process of securing a new trial with adequate representation for Mr. Syed to ensure that the family of Ms. Hae-Min Lee knows with full confidence that the person responsible for her death and the death of their loved one will be held accountable. Ms. Lee's family deserve closure. They deserve justice, and we intend to fight for that. And while this is just one step in a long fight to make sure the legal system in Baltimore is fair and just for all, I want to reiterate to the residents of Baltimore, as I do, as I always have done, that so long as I'm at the helm as State Attorney, I will remain committed to ensuring and pursuing justice and equality for all under the law, which includes victims, witnesses, accusers, and the accused. I said this 4 months following the death of Freddie Gray, and I'm saying it 4 months before the end of my term. Justice is always worth the price paid for its pursuit. Thank you. Any questions? Well, we have...
Question. I know in court there was not a lot of detail given about these potential other suspects. How confident are you that these suspects are able to be part of the trial, accessible?
So I kind of addressed that in my remarks. I cannot, because it's an open and pending matter, I cannot talk about the substance of the case. But I can tell you that we are working with the Baltimore Police Department, and it is an active investigation.
Will that be wrapped up in 30 days to file a new trial?
So what I can tell you is the investigation is separate and apart from the 30-day mandate What we are currently waiting for is DNA analysis, and so we are going to try to expedite that. That is with reference to whether or not Adnan's case will be dismissed, a no prost, and we would certify his innocence. But whether or not the case is set in for trial, if the DNA evidence comes back, and I'll just be candid, and it's Adnan Syed, then clearly, you know, there's implication that we have to proceed. That still entitles him to a fair and just trial. But in any event, we're going to wait for the DNA to come back, and we'll make that determination at that stage.
What happens if that doesn't come back? Speak on behalf of the family.
Matt asked you a question. What happens if that DNA testing is not finished in 30 days?
Yeah, what's the plan? So, I mean, we'll meet that hurdle when it comes, but that's something that we're attempting to expedite.
In that same vein, though, I mean, with the star witness's credibility being impeached and the cell phone data no longer being deemed reliable, is a new trial even possible with the evidence that you have?
So, I mean, at this stage, what we want to do is we feel, again, all of these facts go to the integrity of the conviction, which is problematic. And so it's a matter of, and I don't want to interject my opinion, I can just do it based off of the facts. Once the DNA evidence comes in, it will be much more definitive.
What confidence do you have that these kinds of Brady violations aren't still happening in your office?
So let me be clear, it was in my office. So
the state's attorney's office.
But yes, I mean, I think we have open discovery. I think that we train our prosecutors, and the mantra and mission and vision of my office, it's very different than what it's been in the past. Right? Our mission and vision is justice over convictions. For a very long time, people would measure the success of a prosecutor's office based off of convictions. We don't do that in the city of Baltimore. We go on the basis of justice.
How do you respond to the victim's brother saying you felt blindsided by this when the investigation was going on for a year to get a week's notice?
So, no, I wrote what he said down. He basically said he somewhat felt betrayed. And you can understand why, right? I mean, you have some sort of resolution and you believe that you have closure, and the case comes back up and it rips a whole new sort of, you know, wound that has healed and that you think has healed. And so I understand his frustration and his disappointment, but I also understand the importance as the administrator of the criminal justice system to ensure equality and justice and fairness that is entitled to the defendant as well.
Can you comment about how this case hit your radar? Had it not been for the publicity, would you have gotten to it this fast?
So we were approached by the Office of the Public Defender and Erica Suter, and she'll talk to you. They wanted to come to us, and they came to us and approached us to do, under the JRA, they wanted us to make a modification of the sentence. He still qualifies for a reduction and a modification of his sentence, but when we got the file and we were in possession of it, and we started to look at it, we saw several problematic issues. And so then we began an investigation that went beyond just having a JRA motion in which that conviction would stand. Based off of our conviction integrity unit and reinvestigations into claims of actual innocence, we actually reinvestigated the matter. Thank you, guys.
Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby with Adnan Syed's family and others outside of the courthouse talking about the vacating of his conviction. So what we were asking, Mary, was what's going to be the determining factor for whether or not Syed is tried? The state is waiting for DNA evidence. And Ms. Mosby says once that evidence comes back, that will be pretty much the linchpin to decide whether or not they are going to retry Adnan Syed. That and all of the other information that we were getting from Kurt Nachman as well.
There is a lot to unpack here. We're going to take a quick break. It is almost the top of the hour, and our coverage will continue of this breaking news. Adnan Syed's conviction vacated not long ago. We'll be right back. All right, we are following breaking news in the case of Adnan Syed, the man at the center of the popular podcast Serial.
That's right. This is a blockbuster day in Baltimore legal history. Syed, who was convicted in 2000 and has been in prison since that time, his conviction has been vacated. This does not mean he's necessarily innocent of the crime of killing Hae-Min Lee, but his conviction has been vacated. We saw, and this is the video everyone's going to be watching around the world, Syed walk out of the courtroom into a van. Kirk Notman believes that he's going to go back to the Jessup Prison Institution, but should be able to get a home monitoring device within a short period of time.
And Adnan Syed's family, we believe, is at the podium outside Circuit Court talking. If we can dip into that and listen.
Or his pre-med plans, or 23 years of birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, community events, everyday moments of joy. And I want to add, perhaps the real killers would have been brought to justice. Today, Adnan Syed is 41 years old. He is a thoughtful, devout, compassionate man who is grateful that he can start rebuilding his free life. And I am grateful, too, to the court and to the state's attorney's office for doing the right thing today. I also want to thank Adnan's many, many supporters, including, of course, Rabia Chaudhry, Amy Berg, and the countless people across the country who heard his story and believed him. Your faith and friendship has meant everything to Adnan and to me. When prosecutors do not do their duty, when they do not disclose evidence as they are supposed to, the result can be that innocent people like Adnan lose decades of their lives for crimes they did not commit. Equally tragic, the family of the victim in this case, Hae-Min Lee, recently had to learn that justice, in fact, had not yet been done for their daughter. To Hae's family, you have endured the unimaginable, and you have my deepest sympathy. I have practiced law in Maryland for 15 years, defending people charged with serious crimes. I and my colleagues at the Office of the Public Defender and the Innocence Network have devoted our lives to fighting for our clients to receive a fair shot, what Adnan should have gotten in 1999. To date, more than 3,000 innocent people have been exonerated in this country. In 44% of those cases, evidence of innocence was not disclosed at trial, just like in Adnan's case. Let me say that again. In nearly half of all exonerations nationwide, the state failed to disclose evidence of innocence. In Baltimore, 80% of the exonerations on record involve withheld evidence. Adnan is one of many. Today, the evidence in Adnan's case has finally led to his freedom. As you can imagine, it is an emotional day for him and his family. He will not be making a statement at this time. He asks you all for privacy so that he can start to heal. Thank you again to everyone who believed in Adnan.
What did he say after the decision?
He said he can't believe it's real.
Did he say what he's looking forward to at all?
I think he's looking forward to being with his family.
And for you, can you talk about your reaction right now to this?
I'm elated and really tired.
Are you concerned at all about the prospect of another trial?
Today is a remarkable day for Adnan. Today we focus on the state and the court doing the right thing. Those decisions will be for another day.
Any other questions for Erica?
Sorry, I missed the top. If I could just ask again. There wasn't a lot of visible reaction from Adnan in the courtroom. I'm sure it was a very kind of surreal moment for him. Have you heard anything else from your client about what he's excited?
All right, that is Erica Suter, Adnan Syed's attorney, who has fought for quite some time for, as what she calls it, his freedom. And she says there will be no statement from Adnan. He wants his privacy, as he has got to be as stunned as the rest of us that this has happened today.
I think so, Mary. We have to understand under the rules of law in the United States, anytime someone is accused of a crime, the burden of proof is on the state. During the process of what's known as discovery, it is the state's responsibility to present evidence to the defense to make sure that the defense knows what the state knows. When you don't do that, anything that's withheld is known as exculpatory evidence, and that's what Kurt Nachman talked about. That gets you in trouble. That weakens any kind of conviction. And according to Ms. Souter, this is by hers, but we can certainly look this up and fact check. She says 80% of exonerations in Baltimore involve evidence that is withheld. That means exculpatory.
And in this case, Kai, 23 years have gone by that Adnan was imprisoned. He was 18 at the time. He is now 41 years old. We are continuing to unpack everything that happened.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is
right.
a lot. I mean, Marilyn Mosby also talked about a detective who was involved in this case who later was part of a case that it determined that it was not all above board.
Right.
So we've got to look at a lot here. Real quickly, we did reach out to the presumptive next city state's attorney, Ivan Bates, for comment on the case last week. And this is what he said. After becoming the de facto state's attorney-elect, Ivan Bates is not making any comments towards cases that may fall under his administration because, again, right now, prosecutors, the city state's attorney, has 30 days to determine whether they want to drop the murder charge against Syed or try him again for the murder of Hae-Min Lee. As we heard from Marilyn Mosby, she is waiting for DNA analysis evidence to come back in. She doesn't know when that is going to come back in. And so will that come back in those 30 days? If it doesn't, she'll go to the judge and say, I need more time for sure.
And Ms. Mosby was set to be tried. Of course, that's been moved, Mary. So there are some who believe this was somewhat of a distraction on her part as well. We're going to move on now to some other news here. With eyes on November, the Republican looking to be Maryland's next governor is taking swipes at his Democratic opponent, Wes Moore. GOP hopeful Dan Cox is standing with the family of the other Wes Moore, which is also the title of Wes Moore's first New York Times bestselling book. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost was first to report the concerns about the book months ago. She joins us live with more. Mackenzie?
Yeah, guys, so the concerns about this book, as you mentioned, titled The Other Wes Moore, really center on the words on the back of the book. That's what we heard Delegate Dan Cox really talk about today. In the original print of it, author and now candidate Wes Moore said it was about two boys from Baltimore. We pressed the candidate about that for months. Now we're seeing Dan Cox say that it's raising more questions and concerns. And he held this news conference here outside of City Schools headquarters because we also know that this book is required reading for some high school students. And Dan Cox says he wants the book pulled from the curriculum. The Other Wes Moore, the book title of gubernatorial hopeful Wes Moore's first book, and at the center of controversy.
It's inappropriate to be presenting material that is really fictional campaign material as part of a curriculum.
Delegate Dan Cox, Republican gubernatorial hopeful, says the inconsistencies with his opponent's book, highlighted by months of Fox 45 News' investigations, are reason why Moore should not win the election. Cox focusing on the back cover, which was later changed at the request of Moore, around the same time he started talking about running for governor.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Standing by Cox, the family of the other Wes Moore, who is currently in prison. In April, the same family spoke exclusively with Fox 45 News about the concerns with the candidate and author Moore using their story in his book.
It's a bunch of trash. It's a fabrication. You know, he embellished a tragedy to use to make his triumph, if you would, right?
Cox also highlighting the fact that the book is required reading in high schools across Baltimore. Fox 45 News previously reporting that in 2018, the book was required reading for 9th graders. And in 2020, the city bought just over 4,600 copies of The Other Wes Moore. From 2010 to 2019, the city spending more than $15,000 on copies of the book and field trips to see Moore speak in person. When pressed on the issues, Moore says he stands by his stories.
I don't think I'd let the narrative continue.
Despite the investigations bringing these inconsistencies to light, Moore going on to win the crowded Democratic primary. When asked why he thinks voters will care now,
it was a divided primary on the Democratic side. When you see the larger view of Maryland and they hear these issues and they hear the concerns that you've raised and that others have raised, it's going to resonate.
Moore maintains the stories about how two people could have very different outcomes in their lives. Now, this afternoon, I also got a statement from the Westmore campaign about this latest move from Dan Cox. The Moore campaign says that this was just an attempt by the Cox campaign to distract voters from what's happening on the campaign trail. I also reached out to city schools to get a comment about Cox's call to pull this book from the curriculum, but I'm still waiting to hear back. Live in Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Well, the Baltimore Police Department says it's reviewing whether all policies and procedures were properly followed in last Friday's high-speed pursuit that ended with 3 juveniles in custody. Alexa Ashwell questioned the department and joins us live from outside police headquarters with the very latest on this. Alexa?
Well, Mary, a spokesperson tells me this is standard procedure anytime there is a pursuit. As for this investigation, we're now learning all 3 suspects who were taken into custody and arrested are from York County, Pennsylvania, which is where police say this original armed robbery took place.
Baltimore City Police now saying this vehicle 3 juveniles used to lead officers on a more than 15-mile high-speed pursuit into Baltimore County this past Friday was wanted in connection to an armed robbery in York County, Pennsylvania. The pursuit ending with the suspects in custody and the recovery, police say, of 3 loaded handguns. Former BPD Deputy Commissioner Jason Johnson says the violent crime of an armed robbery does fit the criteria that likely allowed officers to pursue the vehicle in the first place.
BPD has a very specific policy on pursuits and the criteria that have to exist in order for there to be a pursuit.
As for the actual pursuit, Fox 45 News questioning whether all policies and procedures were followed, asking, is this pursuit currently under review? What criteria does the department follow when determining whether to engage in and continue a pursuit? And at any point, did the department determine the pursuit had become too dangerous to the public? Live footage captured the suspects weaving in and out of traffic at high speeds, at one point striking an innocent driver's van. A county police officer assisting in the pursuit was also hurt.
Police supervisors are required to, essentially assert themselves in a supervisory way to determine, A, does the pursuit meet the criteria for an authorized pursuit? In this case, it looks like it did. And then B, to assert that supervisory oversight to make sure the pursuit is being conducted in a way that's safe to the public and to the individual police officers.
Spokesperson also sent me a copy of BPD's pursuit policy. It includes when a pursuit is warranted, considerations such as public safety, and when it's prohibited or should be called off, such as poor weather conditions. The result of the review is not yet complete. Reporting live outside police headquarters, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Alexa, thank you. We want to know what you think. Do you fear crime in Baltimore City is going beyond its borders? So far, 97% of the respondents say yes. Go to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in.
Putting porch pirates on notice, the new plan from residents to fight back and keep their packages secure.
And here's the video we have been waiting to show you again. Adnan Syed walking out of the courthouse this afternoon just minutes ago after his sentence was vacated. We will have much more on today's breaking news coming up.
And if you have plans on doing some grilling this evening, some patchy clouds. There could be a stray outside chance of a sprinkle. Otherwise, temperatures not bad, falling from the warm 80s into the 70s. I'm going to let you know when highs may not even get out of the 60s, though. That could be this week. My Weather Authority forecast.
We continue to follow the breaking news in the case of Adnan Syed, the man at the center of the popular podcast Serial.
Jeff Abel was in the courtroom downtown and joins us now live. Jeff?
That's right. After 22 years in prison, Adnan Syed is a free man tonight. Just a few moments ago, a judge decided that there was indeed an abundance of evidence and decided to vacate the convictions, which he had kept him in jail for 22 years. He came walking out of the courthouse with his attorneys and his family by his side just a few moments ago. Prosecutors had asked that the charges be vacated, that the conviction be vacated because of what they called an abundance of evidence, saying there were witnesses that were not handed over to the defense during his original trial more than 2 decades ago, and other outdated evidence which could have proven otherwise. A few moments ago, State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby took the stand and took the mic, went before the mics and defended her decision.
Becky Feldman subsequently led nearly a year-long exhaustive investigation reviewing the substantive facts of this case, where several problematic issues were presented, and thereafter leading my office to file a motion to vacate the conviction of Adnan Syed.
Of course, the victim in this case, Hae-Min Lee, her family was not in the courthouse, not in the courtroom during today's hearing. They were elsewhere. The brother did testify by Zoom, saying he is disappointed and feels betrayed by the state's attorney's office, who decided to ask the judge to vacate these charges, saying he felt the state was on his side. We are live at the courthouse. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
All right, Jeff, thank you. We're going to continue to follow that breaking news, but first we're going to take a break and talk about our weather out there. Beautiful day, not bad.
Yeah, temperatures up to 87 this afternoon. Should be at 79 for an average high. So, hey, in September, almost fall now.
I know. I called it beautiful because I do like the
I like it.
weather.
Yeah, me too.
But we got some cool weather for you, cool weather lovers in there, too. So let's go ahead and take a look. Our next weather maker, it's a cold front that's moving in from the west. You can see there that batch of showers that is off to our north. Well, eventually, that is going to be making its way closer to us. Take a look now on the radar. Not a whole lot going on here, but as we zoom out, as I mentioned, there is that weather maker, that system that's off to our north. You can see some of the rain and some of the lightning and thunder that is off to our north right now. Let's go ahead and put on the national view and you can get a better picture of this system. Most of the energy is kind of being stolen off to our north, up toward New York, as well as into New England. And it looks like that's where that is going to stay, as that latest system does move toward us and move through our area. Now, most of the cooler air, too, is going to end up heading toward New York and New England. Around here, there will be somewhat lesser humidity as we head into Tuesday and Wednesday. But then, for the first of fall, a significant cold front with serious cooler air coming our way. And I think highs may only struggle potentially by the end of the week in the 60s to near 70 degrees. Right now, mostly cloudy. It's 86. Winds out of the west-southwest at 6 miles an hour. Hazy look there on the Mile 1 Towson cam. Dew point now in the low and mid-60s. So a touch of mugginess. Temperature at 86 here in Baltimore, 84 at Cockeysville, 81 at Bel Air, 83 at Elkton, and 84 at Laurel. Zooming out, look at all that heat in the Midwest. Temperatures at 88 at Omaha. Feels like summer at St. Louis, all the way back to Memphis and Dallas-Fort Worth. That warmth continues to arc our way over the next couple of days. We'll be on the edge of it, though. It won't be the extreme heat before the cooler air gets here. Take a look now. Category 2 Hurricane Fiona, after really just giving Puerto Rico all kinds of flooding problems, power grid problems. Now, looks like this potentially becomes at least a Category 3, if not a Category 4 storm, as it makes its way potentially later this week over Bermuda. So all eyes there. And then that's going to move its way up into the Canadian Maritimes. And you can see all the computer models kind of clustered right around that Bermuda track. So I guess that's good news for us. Unfortunately, these poor folks are going to have likely some big problems here in the island of Bermuda coming up in the next couple of days. We could see some swells along the mid-Atlantic coast. Otherwise, another couple areas of disturbed weather. They have a low chance of development, something that we'll keep an eye on over the next 3 to 5 days at least. Future scan overnight into early tomorrow morning. Any of those showers gone after sunset. And I think by tomorrow morning, early temperatures Going to be settling down into the 60s, lesser humidity levels, and actually, in fact, a couple of really nice, almost summery days for Tuesday, Wednesday. Lower humidity, some showers Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Look at those highs only in the low 70s, lows in the 40s potentially into Friday and Saturday. Real touch of fall there.
Jonathan, thank you. A new invention to keep porch pirates from scoring your new purchases. The contraption one local man is hoping will help. And could your children be using emojis to buy drugs? The warning signs you should be on the lookout for to know if they need help.
Is the president's optimism about the economy warranted or off base? I'm Atrell Nashar on Capitol Hill with a look at his prediction of where things are headed.
A new Goucher College poll is giving us a better idea of what Maryland residents think of President Biden. The state is evenly split on Biden's performance. 48% of respondents say they do approve of the president, while another 48% disapprove. If you look closer at those numbers, 74% of Democrats approve of the president, 37% of independents, and just 14% of Republicans. We'll have much more insight from the poll coming up later in this newscast. And while many economists are on the edge of their seats this week as the Federal Reserve prepares another interest rate hike, President Biden detailing in a new 60 Minutes interview what he can do to prevent a recession. National correspondent Atrell Nashar has a closer look at what he said and whether it squares with the stress Americans are feeling.
In this moment of economic uncertainty with a potential recession looming, President Biden showing a steady hand.
Is the economy going to get worse before it gets better? No.
The president's answer comes after the stock market had its worst week in months. Investors spooked by worse than expected inflation data at a new annual rate of 8.3%. Nerves high ahead of action by the Fed later this week, widely expected to roll out another aggressive interest rate hike. A tough call for the central bank either way. Raise rates and risk slowing the economy into recession, or do nothing and allow prices to soar. President Biden describes his role in preventing a recession.
Continue to grow the economy
and we're growing the economy. It's growing in a way that it hasn't in years and years.
But economic data tells a more complicated story. Gross domestic product has actually had negative growth for 2 consecutive quarters, after 6 straight quarters of rapid growth, which many economists say was unsustainable. 2 areas of consistent growth: jobs and manufacturing.
We're growing entire new industries. 695, I think it is, or 85,000 new manufacturing jobs just since I become president of the United States.
Polls show the economy is a vulnerability for Democrats here on Capitol Hill who are up for re-election. A new NBC survey shows that voters favor Republicans on the issue, but when asked which party they want to control Congress, Democrats and Republicans got equal support.
I'm Nancy Mace, and I have had it with crazy inflation.
Now it's a 7-week sprint to Election Day.
That's from the people who push bad trade deals with China. I vote against them every single time.
Each side working to convince voters they're the ones who can restore economic stability, while the Fed fights its own battle against inflation. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atrel Nishar reporting.
Well, according to the AAA, the average cost for a gallon of gas nationwide is now at $3.68. That is a bit higher than here in Maryland, where it's been hovering around $3.40 to $3.50. A year ago at this time, gas was just over $3 a gallon. Now, AAA says gas prices will go up again if the global oil costs rise. Well, your gas and electric bills will be going up. Natural gas prices have soared from a global supply shortage, and they're expected to stay high for months as we get closer to winter. The Energy Information Administration estimates that electricity will average close to 15 cents per kilowatt hour this year. That is up 7.5% from last year. The pandemic has fundamentally changed the way we behave at work. Looking into why it has some on track to become quiet quitters. A new poll giving us a better idea about the issues voters care about before the November election. We're speaking with one of the people responsible for that poll to find out what it can show us. And finding out a package has been stolen right off your porch is one of the most frustrating experiences. Some new plans to crack down on porch pirates in Baltimore.
Live from WBFF-TV in Baltimore, this is breaking news.
After 20 years in jail, Adnan Syed's conviction was vacated today. Fox 45 News was outside the courthouse in downtown Baltimore when Syed walked out.
His release comes less than a week after the office of the city state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, moved to toss out his conviction. She's now asking for a new trial for Syed, depending on evidence that she's still waiting on, some DNA evidence. Our Jeff Abel will join us live in about 30 minutes. In a city in crisis, if you're ordering a lot of online items, there is a chance at some point some packages could get snatched.
And we all are ordering everything online, right? Porch pirates are becoming more brazen, and there's little that can be done to stop them.
That is until now. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor has more on a new contraption that a local contractor is building to protect your packages. Rebecca?
Yeah, guys, and I agree. I'm also a big online orderer, so this contraption, I'm excited to tell you about it for myself as well. But the thing about porch pirates is they can't steal what they can't see. So right now, this Amazon box that's just sitting out here in the open, it's a massive target. But we know if it's out of sight, it's also going to be out of mind for thieves.
The city's rise in crime is coming for your front door.
A lot of issues.
That is, if it hasn't already arrived.
We can't leave packages for more than a couple minutes.
All across Baltimore, day in and day out, porch pirates have been pilfering packages from people like Allie and Marie.
I mean, extremely disheartening and just like frustrating.
Who live in a nice part of town just north of Patterson Park.
Usually it's you know, clothing, things of that nature that could be $100 to $300 clothing.
By the time I get the delivery notification from Amazon that it's out there within, 5-10 minutes or so, come out to the door, it's gone.
It's an area they love, but aren't sure they can stay in much longer.
When you deal with something like this, it just almost is like, is it time for us to move?
To make matters worse, both say investing in Ring doorbell cameras has done little to deter crooks.
Mine misses like pretty much every package being taken.
But now, a local construction worker is getting to work on a mission to put package thieves out of business.
The pirates, they think they can get away with it.
Inspired by a story he read on social media.
A person got stolen their medicine. Somebody just come and took it. And, well, that was what made my heart go soft.
Alejandro Espinosa is taking a break from home improvements.
So this is a prototype.
To create a contraption that he hopes will improve his entire community.
I don't have a name yet. I would like to call it anti-theft box or hood-proof box.
Here's how it works. The box is guarded with a special lock and latch. So when the package drops down...
And then when it drops...
The latch comes up.
Because this thing is on the way for them to grab it.
And no one can open the door without the code.
It needs to be secure.
Convenient for us, and it's not just like the plastic or the metal boxes that everyone sees and kind of ignores too.
We've seen a couple different options, but this one's just like really sturdy.
I'm just focusing on making them tough, like resistant to the elements. Like, if someone tries to break on it, they will break their hand before they can break into the box.
Allie and Marie say their whole block will benefit from this new lockbox.
Even, if our neighbor's out of town, she can utilize it and, we can just grab something for her.
And while it is a little pricey, this one cost about $1,000.
I can make it affordable to whoever needs it.
More than profits, Alejandro just wants to provide Baltimore residents peace of mind.
Like that person that got their medicine stolen, if I can find it, I'll build one for her for free.
And again, this is just Alejandro's first lockbox that he's ever made, so they are still very much a work in progress. They're also completely customizable. So if you want one bigger for the whole neighborhood to share, you want one that's smaller, you want one made out of different materials, whatever you want, he can do it for you. We spent the day with him. He is a great guy. If you're interested in buying one of these lockboxes off of him, his contact information is going to be in this story on our website at foxbaltimore.com. Reporting live in Baltimore, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
A new Goucher poll just out today looks at the number of topics that affect the November election and how Marylanders plan to vote.
That's right. Dr. Malaya Cromer is the director of the Sarah T. Hughes Center for Politics at Goucher College. She joins us now live. Great to see you, Dr. Cromer. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, we heard earlier this hour, if the general election for Maryland governor were held today, 53% say they would vote for Democrat Wes Moore compared to 31% for Republican nominee Dan Cox. It's a wide gap. Are you surprised by this or not?
It's not about being surprised. It's just looking at the electoral dynamics of the voter registration numbers here in our state. Democrats outnumber Republicans by a margin of 2 to 1. And there are some cases, like, for instance, during the Hogan years, where some Democrats are willing to perhaps support a Republican candidate, a particular type of Republican candidate for governor. Hogan was able to win about a third of Democrats. But by and large, a unified Democratic Party and one that has a top-of-the-ticket nominee like Wes Moore that Democrats are across the board are comfortable coalescing behind, you're going to see a margin very similar to this.
Dr. Cromer, you also asked Maryland voters how they will vote for the ballot measure to legalize the recreational use of marijuana for people 21 years of age and older. What did you find out there?
Yeah, this has been really interesting and a long time coming, frankly, in the state. The Goucher College poll turns 10 years old this year, and we've been asking about this issue for the better part of a decade. It typically bounces around between the sort of lower 60s and the mid 60s in terms of people's support for the legalization of recreational cannabis. It's what we're seeing right now on this poll, and it's asked in the exact ballot language. I think another interesting caveat to this is it's not just about legalizing recreational use. It's going to be about expunging those records for individuals who have a possession charge. And Marylanders are pretty supportive of that as well. Around 64% say they would support expungement.
And moving on to issues that mean the most for Maryland voters, although I think that one does mean a lot to voters, and how they could help determine their choice for governor. At the top of the list, the economy and taxes, followed by crime and public safety. Any surprises to you there?
Well, no. So crime and public safety is an issue that has sort of risen as a number one issue over the last 2 years or so. But things like the economy and jobs and our third pick, which is public education or education, these are perennial issues in Maryland elections as well. In Maryland politics, we talk about them a lot. They're top of the mind issues for almost all voters. But again, I think addressing the crime and public safety is going to be really important, not just for the gubernatorial candidate, but for the Democrats, Republicans, and the Maryland General Assembly to begin to address next legislative session.
Dr. Malaya Cromer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Baltimore County Public Schools is looking for a new director of transportation. The school system posted that position in June following a turbulent school year for the transportation department. Now, in the past year, FOX45 News has reported on school bus violence, a major bus driver shortage, and in November of 2021, Project Baltimore broke the story of county school buses with broken parts, passing inspection and carrying students.
There's a whole culture, I think, that needs to be changed in Baltimore County Public Schools.
Well, tonight at 10 o'clock, we know what we know happened to the former director of transportation, Dr. Jess Grimm, and the qualifications the school system is looking for in a new director.
There are new questions tonight about President Biden's immigration policy moving forward. This following reports that construction of the border wall may be resuming along some parts of the U.S.-Mexico border. National correspondent Christine Frizzell brings us the latest.
At border barrier construction sites around the country, some work has continued, including adding metal netting to prevent rocks from falling onto the roads below. But work on expanding the border wall, a signature policy under President Donald Trump, was mostly halted due to an executive order President Biden signed his first day in office.
The state of the nation today is no time to waste. Get to work immediately.
But new reports detail how construction in some areas is getting ready to resume. U.S. Customs and Border Protection so far providing few details about where and when.
Would you support the idea of construction picking back up?
I take all my advice from the Border Patrol, and they tell me that, yes, physical barriers do play a very important role in some hard-to-control areas.
But Senator John Cornyn and others point to what the Biden administration is not doing to deal with record numbers of migrants arriving each and every day, that increase prompting some governors to transport migrants away to big cities and small towns like Martha's Vineyard.
He didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when we had millions of people illegally pouring across the southern border. It's only when you have 50 illegal aliens end up in a very wealthy, rich sanctuary enclave that he decides to scramble on this.
Local leaders there now fighting back, calling on the Department of Justice to investigate Governor DeSantis for interference in the immigration process and possible human trafficking.
When you speak to these Venezuelan immigrants, they describe being kidnapped, right? That needs to be investigated. All of these individuals were not in violation of federal law. They had claimed asylum. They had all received alien numbers and various degrees of processing.
The prospect of the border wall back on, raising new questions about the next chapter of the immigration debate. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
Well, one of the greatest Ravens ever is giving back to his community, talking with Ray Lewis about his efforts to help those in need in Baltimore.
Quiet quitting. Everyone is talking about it, but is it real? And who needs to fix it? I'm Angela Brown in Washington, D.C. We dive into both next.
And a real summer feel today, up to 87 here in Baltimore. But we've got some cooler numbers on the way. Going to finally start feeling like fall just in time for fall. I'll let you know how cool it's going to get. My Weather Authority forecast.
It's called quiet quitting, and it's the latest buzz phrase that's making headlines on social media, even at work. The National Desk Angela Brown tells us this may be a trendy term, but quiet quitting isn't new.
It's become a confession. Employees whisper to each other around the water cooler. They're quietly quitting. But career strategist Julie Balke says the term is a little deceiving.
People are actually setting boundaries. They're doing their job,
but they're not necessarily willing to do somebody else's job or 50% more than their job. So it's a little bit different than what it sounds.
So what exactly is quiet quitting? Experts say it's an employee not being engaged, still performing, but only doing what's required in their job description. For nearly 20 years, Mark Bellino has studied the relationship between employees and employer and says it poses a problem for companies.
We do need people who are willing to kind of go beyond or to even do the things that are in their job description at a really high level.
A new poll from Gallup found that quiet quitters make up at least 50% of the U.S. workforce.
And now that we've got this situation where we've got a talent shortage, which has caused people's workloads to increase because the jobs around them are not getting filled, and so the extra work falls to them.
But quiet quitting is nothing new. Gallup has been tracking worker engagement for years, and in 2016, before the pandemic, found that 71% of millennials were not engaged in the workforce back then either. An old problem with a new name that some say is an indicator of poor management.
If they're not going above and beyond for the employee, I don't know why they would expect the employee to go above and beyond for them.
Apparently, quiet quitting is not just for workers. A new survey found that a third of college students report quiet quitting, putting their mental health and work-life balance over schoolwork. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Well, taking a look here on the HD radar. Near miss by some showers, some to the north up toward Pennsylvania and New York, and some others down into Virginia and West Virginia. But here we are in Baltimore, sitting pretty, just some clouds. But outside of that, most of the rain has missed us. Maybe a sprinkle here or there, maybe. But in any case, this is our latest weather maker. It's a very, very weak cold front. It's going to be rolling through late tonight into tomorrow early morning. And behind that, drier air, so a little less humid for our Tuesday and Wednesday, but then a serious, significant cold front that's going to move through. That's going to be the weather maker after this one, sometime late Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And not only will it turn less humid, it will turn significantly cooler. Take a look down on our Mile 1 Towson Cam. It looks like we're taking a look here at the streets near the traffic oval. 86 degrees, winds out of the west-southwest at 6 miles an hour. As that cold front approaches from the west, hit a high of 87 thus far on the day. Our dew point in the low to mid 60s, so a little touch muggy right now. It's not extremely humid, but you do start kind of feeling the air when those dew points are in the 60s like they are. Temperatures in the low and mid 80s, which is about 5 to 10 degrees warmer than they should be for this time of year on average. Now, you thought it was warm here. How about the front range? Denver right now, 90 degrees in the Mile High City. We've got 94 at Oklahoma City, 94 at Dallas, 96 at Memphis. We're on the edge of that heat, so it is going to stay warm around here next couple of days. Not that hot, though, before the big cool down comes. Now, out in the tropics, after absolutely devastating portions, actually a good portion of Puerto Rico with flooding and power grid issues, now Fiona continues its trek northbound. Could become a Category 3, maybe Category 4 storm later on this week, as it could make a direct hit on Bermuda. Of course, that's a very small target, so really going to have to take a pretty exact track for that to happen. But at least for now, the official track does call for that, and then eventually heading up towards the Canadian Maritimes. And you can see the computer models all generally going in that direction, unfortunately, of Bermuda, thankfully staying away from the East Coast. But again, there could be some swells that do head our way here in the mid-Atlantic through the weekend. Outside of that, there's a low chance of development in the central Atlantic, another one just south and southwest of that toward the Windward Islands. That's a low chance of development as well, and we'll keep our eyes on those. Outside of that, again, a sprinkle chance here or there, but most of those are gone through this evening after sunset clears out. And look at those temperatures, comfortable by morning. Back down generally into the 60s for tomorrow afternoon. It's a warm day, 84, 86, even warmer yet on Wednesday. There's that more significant cold front for Thursday. By the way, that's when fall begins. Clears out late in the day, high 78 degrees. Fall begins 9:04 p.m. on Thursday. And then look at that into the weekend. Lows in the 40s, potentially first time this season, and highs in the 60s to near 70 heading into the early weekend days there.
This morning, Ravens legend Ray Lewis is raising money to help those in poverty and lifting up disadvantaged communities. Be More lifestyle host Mark Clark was on the greens with Ray today, talking with him about his vision.
If only we had him last night. If only Ray was there. But hey, we got good news. He's here, and he's doing a great thing in the community. Ray, talk about what's going on out here.
Yeah. You know what, man, we came out of Waverly, as you see, it's so beautiful, just being out here. But the bottom line is, how do we come out here and how do we impact our community at different levels, right? You know, like talking about diversity, inclusion, all these different things of life that we actually are tackling inside of Power 52. And the graduations is probably the biggest thing that changes your life the moment you see it, right? Because you see someone come from a blurred vision and walk into an opportunity, and this light clicks on, right? So today is that day, right? To actually bring the golfing community together to say Power 52 is kind of moving into a different trajectory, right, in life. And so now we're just basing ourselves that it makes sense to just keep doing more and more and more and more and inviting all these communities to just help our community.
I love it.
Better. Yeah.
Great event, great cause, and the proceeds go to exactly what Ray's talking about. Ray, thank you so much. Thank you for all those years, my brother.
Always.
He's still here.
Always.
If only we had him last night, but it's okay. He's still here with us. Mark Clark, Fox 45 News.
Well, coming up at 6 o'clock on Fox 45, a judge's decision in the fate of Adnan Syed. We're live with what's next as a judge vacates his murder conviction.
Never have the Ravens blown a 21-point fourth quarter lead, nor has it happened in the NFL the last 12 years. But that all changed yesterday in week 2 during the Ravens' home opener loss to Miami, a stunning 42-38 loss. The Ravens had a 3-touchdown lead in the fourth. Miami only led for the final 14 seconds of the game. And now here the Ravens are on Monday trying to make sense of something that shouldn't have happened, but did, in large part thanks to a defense that could not generate second-half pressure and played 3 rookies in the secondary that resulted in blown coverage and big-time fourth-quarter mistakes.
It's basic fundamental stuff that we work on all the time. Easier said than done, but got to be done. So we'll work on those things, and we're not blaming anybody. We just got to keep working and get better at that stuff. Sometimes lessons are learned the hard way. I don't know how many times in national football you come out there with a bunch of young guys and all of a sudden they're doing everything perfectly right. And when you get challenged with, really good players, in critical situations, it goes bad and it's painful. It hurts. But you know what? You remember those lessons.
Flush it and head to New England. Now, this won't help the Ravens' lack of pressure. Outside linebacker Steven Means is done for the season. A torn Achilles during yesterday's game, the only snap he took. Kai?
Morgan, thank you. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 6 o'clock. Adnan Syed has his murder conviction vacated less than a week after prosecutors moved to vacate that conviction. We're live outside the court with what comes next.
These devices are being made somewhere and fentanyl's being put into them.
And vapes laced with fentanyl. After the break, the urgent search in one Alabama school after a student died of an overdose. Why officials fear other students could be in danger.
Live from WBFF TV in Baltimore, this is breaking news.
We are following the major breaking news of the day. After 23 years in prison, Adnan Syed's murder conviction was overturned today. Now, Fox 45 News was outside the courthouse in downtown Baltimore when Syed walked out of the courthouse. His release comes less than a week after the office of City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby moved to vacate his conviction. Our Jeff Abel is live downtown following the release. And Jeff, quite a moment for this case that the nation has really followed since the popular Serial podcast.
Indeed it is. In fact, the courthouse erupted in cheers a few moments ago when the judge ordered the sheriff in the courtroom to take the shackles off, saying Adnan Syed is a free man. After 22 years in prison, Syed came walking out of the courthouse with the attorneys and family by his side. In court, the judge granted a motion to vacate his murder conviction. Some 22 years ago, he had been convicted of killing his girlfriend, Hayman Lee, in a case that got national attention. Well, today, prosecutors say they've identified potential suspects and other evidence which question the integrity of Syed's conviction.
Becky Feldman subsequently led nearly a year-long exhaustive investigation reviewing the substantive facts of this case, where several problematic issues were presented, and thereafter leading my office to file a motion to vacate the conviction of Adnan Syed.
Well, the victim's brother did testify via Zoom in court today, saying he felt betrayed by the state's attorney's office. Right now, the state's attorney has 30 days to decide whether to continue to file and retry Syed or drop it altogether. We're live at the courthouse tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Jeff, thank you. Well, public defender Erica Suter again accused investigators and prosecutors in the original trial of the case of withholding evidence of other suspects in the case. She also provided insight into what Adnan Syed is feeling after speaking with him upon his release.
He said he can't believe it's real.
Did he say what he's looking forward to at all?
I think he's looking forward to being with his family.
Well, we reached out to the presumptive next city state's attorney, Ivan Bates, for comment on the case last week. On Friday, his campaign told us, quote, after becoming the de facto state's attorney-elect, Ivan Bates is not making any comments toward cases that might fall or may fall under his administration. Bates has said in the past he did not plan to retry Adnan Syed. Well, a focus turns to what's next. It's been reported that BPD has reopened the case. Former city prosecutor Kurt Nachman talks about the possibility that a killer has been out there this whole time and the first steps detectives and prosecutors could take.
The homicide detective, they have several homicide detectives assigned to cold cases, would get this case. They do have specialized training in cold cases and investigating old cases that have gone dormant. They'll go back. They'll sort of shake the tree for the various suspects, which were not named in the state's attorney's office motion, and they'll interview them. They'll see whether or not they're potential suspects, real suspects, or whether or not they can effectively be excluded as a suspect in this case. Again, there's a lot of information that we don't know as members of the public that clearly the state's attorney's office chose to withhold from its filing, and mostly that has to do with who those potential suspects were.
Well, Adnan Syed is being released after the city state's attorney's office says new evidence needs to be considered. But experts have raised questions about the timing of the announcement, considering Marilyn Mosby herself is facing a federal trial.
She's had 8 years to review this case, and now she finds compelling evidence after she's been booted from office and after the federal court is going forward with her trial. It's not a coincidence that Marilyn Mosby is doing something that's in her best interest.
Timing is absolutely curious in terms of coincidental with her trial and attempting to pander to Adnan Syed's followers.
Well, you may remember the announcement last week as Marilyn Mosby was in court over her own federal indictment. Stay with Fox 45 News for continuing coverage. We'll have the latest developments online at foxbaltimore.com and right here on your TV. With eyes on November, the Republican looking to be Maryland's next governor is taking swipes at his Democratic opponent, Wes Moore. GOP hopeful Dan Cox is standing with the family of the other Wes Moore, which is also the title of the candidate's first New York Times best-selling book. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost was first to report on the concerns about the book months ago. She has the latest push from Cox.
The concerns all center around this book and the back cover, where the author had written it was about two boys from Baltimore. That wording has since been changed, and his opponent, Republican Dan Cox, held a news conference outside of City Schools headquarters because the book itself is part of the curriculum for some high school students across Baltimore. And now Cox says he wants the book pulled. The Other Wes Moore, the book title of gubernatorial hopeful Wes Moore's first book, and at the center of controversy.
It's inappropriate to be presenting material that is really fictional campaign material as part of a curriculum.
Delegate Dan Cox, Republican gubernatorial hopeful, says the inconsistencies with his opponent's book, highlighted by months of Fox 45 News' investigations, are reason why Moore should not win the election. Cox focusing on the back cover, which was later changed at the request of Moore around the same time he started talking about running for governor.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Standing by Cox, the family of the other Wes Moore, who is currently in prison. In April, the same family spoke exclusively directly with Fox 45 News about the concerns with the candidate and author Moore using their story in his book.
It's a bunch of trash. It's a fabrication. You know, he embellished a tragedy to use to make his triumph, if you would, right?
Cox also highlighting the fact that the book is required reading in high schools across Baltimore. Fox 45 News previously reporting that in 2018, the book was required reading for 9th graders. And in 2020, the city bought just over 4,600 copies of The Other Wes Moore. From 2010 to 2019, the city spending more than $15,000 on copies of the book and field trips to see Moore speak in person. When pressed on the issues, Moore says he stands by his stories.
I don't think I'd let the narrative continue.
Despite the investigations bringing these inconsistencies to light, Moore going on to win the crowded Democratic primary. When asked why he thinks voters will care now,
it was a divided primary on the Democratic side. When you see the larger view of Maryland and they hear these issues and they hear the concerns that you've raised and that others have raised, it's going to resonate.
Moore maintains the stories about how two people could have very different outcomes in their lives. After the event, the Wes Moore campaign issued a statement calling the event really a desperate attempt to distract voters from what they say is happening on the campaign trail. In Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Well, that new Goucher poll found Democrat Wes Moore holds a 22-point lead over Republican Dan Cox. The poll surveyed 1,000 Maryland residents and identified 748 likely voters. According to the poll, many of those likely voters are set on their choice. Now, the poll also found 59% of likely voters in Maryland say they will vote for the ballot measure to legalize the recreational use of marijuana for people 21 and older. 7% told pollsters they are undecided on the issue. If approved, recreational marijuana would become legal for people 21 and older on July 1st of 2023. People would be able to possess up to a 1.5 ounces of recreational cannabis without penalty. The world bids farewell to Queen Elizabeth II, the scenes from the monarch's state funeral.
And if you're spending the evening out, maybe a sports game for the kids or just grilling out on the deck, 7 p.m. temperatures at 80, outside chance of a shower, and then comfortable in the 70s overnight. I'm going to let you know when the next big risk of rain and much cooler temperature comes. My Weather Authority forecast.
President Biden facing some challenges from within his own party on how to keep America's energy supply in check. I'm Scott Thuman in Washington to explain.
Fox 45 News, winner of 17 2022 Regional Emmy Awards, more than all other Baltimore news stations combined.
Let us give thanks for Queen Elizabeth's commitment to the Commonwealth throughout her reign.
11 days after her passing, Queen Elizabeth II is laid to rest. The Queen made her final journey to Windsor Castle this morning, where she was laid to rest alongside her husband, Prince Philip. Members of the royal family walked behind her coffin during the procession along the roads to Windsor Castle. Tens of thousands of Britons lined the streets, hoping to see her for a final time and thank her for her service to the country.
Well, I think she's a symbol, really, a symbol of the strength and power of the country and the unity that she brings together with that family spirit. She's always been there, so she's not political. She cares about everyone. There's no agenda, and has always set an example of values which are really important for us.
Sad for a lady that's given her life to serve our country. It didn't really feel real till I walked through there, and now it feels very real that she's actually gone. But I felt I needed to come and say goodbye from myself and from my family and say thank you.
The Queen's funeral drew world leaders to London. President Biden and First Lady Joe Biden were in attendance. Queen Elizabeth worked with 15 British prime ministers and met 13 U.S. presidents during her 70-year reign. Well, now that the Queen has been laid to rest, the country will turn toward her son Charles's coronation. While he officially became king after her death, the ceremony is unlikely to happen for some time. When Queen Elizabeth's father died, the country waited more than a year before holding her coronation. Mary?
Guy, thank you. Well, the average cost for a gallon of gas is now $3.68. That is 4 cents lower than the average price a week ago, and it is 24 cents lower than a month ago. AAA says a drop in demand for gas has kept prices on the decline despite increasing oil prices. But AAA says pump prices will probably go up again if global oil costs keep rising. Drivers in Maryland are paying $3.45 for a gallon of gas. Now, part of the reason you're paying less at the pump these days is due to moves from the White House. The president tapping into the nation's strategic oil reserves is one of them. But now there's demand for more help, and from people in his own party. As Sinclair's chief political correspondent Scott Thuman shows us, that's creating some difficult decisions for President Biden.
A welcome sight for millions as gas prices continue to drop, helping counter inflation that's hurting so many.
It saves me about 10 to 15 bucks, so I'm really happy about the new prices. It's going down a little bit.
But will they keep going down?
What can you do to keep that price down?
Remember, I got some criticism for releasing 1 million barrels of oil a day from a strategic petroleum reserve. And then along came the industry saying they'd produce another 1 million barrels a day by the spring. So I think we're in relatively good shape.
But not everyone is so confident. The nation's emergency supply has dropped to 434 million barrels, the lowest since 1984. While that drawdown is scheduled to end in October, some Democrats want to keep it going, writing to Biden along with the war in Russia. Hurricane season could bring further disruptions to domestic oil production. We urge your administration to commit to releasing additional barrels through the end of this year at a minimum. Republicans, though, called it a gimmick from the start.
It's another Hail Mary pass by a president who is desperately trying to deal with the problems he created.
The oil industry says the president spent too long discouraging domestic production.
I would call for the president and others to look at what we're seeing in Europe, look at some of the signals we're even seeing in our own country, and acknowledge that a different conversation is necessary.
Biden still pushing a more green mentality, announcing last week almost $1 billion will be used to install 500,000 electric car charging stations across 35 states, making cross-country trips more of a reality.
The Great American Road Trip is going to be fully electrified.
A lot of pressure on President Biden right now. Analysts at J.P. Morgan warning that with demand still outpacing supply, a barrel of oil right now in the high 80s could cost $150 next year. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
Officials in Puerto Rico are assessing the damage and working to get the power back on after a major hit from Hurricane Fiona. The storm made landfall yesterday, packing 90-mile-per-hour winds, knocking out power to the entire island. More than 3 million people were without power. Record flooding is being reported, with the governor calling the damage, quote, catastrophic.
Unfortunately so, I have to say that the hurricane and now the storm, the related storm, has covered the whole island.
Well, hundreds of homes and businesses have either been damaged or destroyed, prompting water rescues and widespread evacuations. At least 1,300 people slept in shelters last night, bringing back memories of Hurricane Maria, which devastated the island 5 years ago this week. And Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers is tracking Fiona. Jonathan, we were talking about Maria and the devastation it did to the power grid, and now they're back to where they were.
Yeah, really hard to believe after Maria and some of the attempted improvements after that. Now we're still dealing with the same situation. And you can see all of these rain bands. You can't even see Puerto Rico here because of all the enhanced red and blue and green cloud cover. That's the intense thunderstorms associated with now intensifying Fiona. That's why we've had not only the damaging winds, but that catastrophic flooding that's been persisting even as the storm now passes. So again, our prayers out to those folks in Puerto Rico, and we continue to see this traipse its way northbound, increasing to a major hurricane over the next several days. Into the middle of the week, could be threatening Bermuda as a potential Category 3 or Category 4, and then zooming its way up into the Canadian Maritimes and away. Now, the good news for the east coast of the United States is if you track all of these computer model forecasts, we call them the spaghetti models because they look like kind of a plate of spaghetti here, they are all in pretty good agreement that this stays away from the U.S. But unfortunately for Bermuda, it looks like they're in fairly good agreement that there's going to be at least some impact there. Could see some swells, though, heading into the mid-Atlantic for the middle and ends of the week. Outside of that, our latest weather maker is a cold front that's pushing through. Showers and storms north, some showers south, but not much here in Baltimore. We've had some clouds. Those showers will continue to push eastbound and away, and that cold front weakens as it gets here, so we'll be drier, but not that much cooler next couple of days. But just in time for the first to fall on Thursday, yes, another cold front, and that will be significant. So it could turn much cooler by the end of the week. Maybe highs, say, only in the 60s or 70s. Some of the coolest air we've seen since last spring. Toyota East Harbor Skycam, those hazy skies persist. We've got a mainly clear sky, 84, as we take a beautiful look at M&T Bank Stadium. Winds out of the west-southwest at about 15, bringing in those 70s and 80s still, even into the evening. Big heat out west. That continues to, again, kind of edge in from the western United States and the middle portion of the U.S. So for us, it's not going to be extremely hot, but it will be above average. That will continue into the rest of the evening. Overnight tonight down into the 60s likely. And I think for tomorrow, sunshine back and highs again in the 80s. So for tonight, 64, any sprinkles gone, then clearing. 84 sunshine tomorrow, less humid. I'm going to let you know when the much cooler air gets here. My exclusive 10-day forecast.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
Many Puerto Rican communities are underwater tonight after Hurricane Fiona battered the island with up to 30 inches of rain. The governor calls the destruction catastrophic. All that rain destroyed roads and bridges and triggered landslides. More than 1,000 stranded people have already been rescued as teams look to save even more. Most of the island is without power, a situation that could last for days.
Follow the National Weather Desk on your favorite social media platform.
These devices are being made somewhere and fentanyl's being put into them.
Tonight, an urgent search in one Alabama school for the possibility of vapes laced with fentanyl. A 15-year-old student died a couple of weeks ago after taking pills laced with fentanyl in school. As Lisa Liba-Renjak with our Sinclair sister station in Alabama reports, officials were told those vapes laced with fentanyl were readily available inside that school.
We are following up on that information. However, that's not the only school in the county. We really want to look in to see how prevalent it may be in other schools. That just happened to be where she went to school.
While officials say vapes are already a huge problem inside schools, now they have to worry about kids hitting a vape laced with a potentially fatal ingredient.
One of the things that we suspect is that these devices are being made somewhere and fentanyl's being put into them, and then they're selling them to our children.
Virginia Guy is the executive director of the Drug Education Council in Mobile. As you can see, she's very passionate about informing people on what they need to know about different vapes and drugs that are out there, but she doesn't do it alone.
It's terrifying, and it's something that we need to talk to students about and parents and let them know that this is something that's happening and they need to be aware of.
Jane Bartlett-Nenstiel visits schools weekly.
These devices have been designed to be sneaky, they're very techy, and they're small, so students are able to hide them. That's what's pretty alarming.
Chief Deputy Paul Birch with the Mobile County Sheriff's Office says if someone is found with a vape laced with fentanyl, that's a felony. If they're selling it, giving it away, whatever the case is, that's another charge.
It's very concerning whether it be vapes or fake pills or any other type drug that has fentanyl in it, because you can't control the potency of it.
There are many resources out there for anyone battling an addiction. Just take out your phone, open your camera, and then point it at the QR code right there on your screen. It'll take you to our website for a list of those resources.
Exclusive 10-day forecast, mid to upper 80s. Tuesday, Wednesday, showers. Wednesday night into Thursday morning. That's a cold front for the first of fall there on Thursday. High 78 for Thursday. Big cool down for Friday, Saturday. Some of the coolest air since last spring. Look at those lows in the 40s. Warming to 77, though, by Sunday. Showers and storms Monday. And another cold front takes us to the mid 70s middle of next week.
An electrifying but then disappointing day at M&T Bank Stadium yesterday for the Ravens home opener. Lamar Jackson, he played out of his mind, basically doing all he could in this one. Jackson passed for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns and ran for 119 yards while adding another score to the ground. It was his 11th career game of 100 or more yards rushing. Jackson passed Michael Vick for the most in NFL history for a quarterback. Now, of course, we all know, despite all of that, the Ravens fell to the Dolphins.
No, I want to win. That record don't mean nothing if you ain't winning. They didn't let that.
Well, that's all for Fox 45 News. Thanks for watching.